Is the NHS doomed to failure? So first up is a chart. This is inflation-adjusted figures for the NHS budget. This data spans from 1956 to 2017. As you can see, basically the NHS budget goes up above inflation every year. I mean, it was slightly flat after the Great Recession. After 2008, it was slightly flat. But pretty much the trend is above inflation budget increases every year. And that's to maintain, only to maintain the standard of the NHS, or maybe even get slightly worse. The general consensus is that NHS has been getting worse over the last several years, so it needs above inflation budget increases for a decrease in quality of services. You can look at this another way. Here's data from the Nuffield Trust. This is the NHS budget as a percentage of GDP. As you can see, the overall trend, there are ups and downs, obviously, as GDP expands and contracts. But the overall trend is the NHS budget increases as a percentage of GDP, and the trend's definitely up. So this is obviously something that can't continue forever. You can't have above inflation increases every year. You can't keep on increasing the NHS budget as a percentage of GDP every year. It's a mathematical impossibility, although sooner or later you get to the point where the NHS is 100% of GDP, and that's obviously not something that can happen. You can't have an economy where only healthcare is the only thing in the economy. So that's something that can't happen. However, there seems to be a massive refusal in the UK for just people in the media, just people day to day. There seems to be a complete refusal for people to even debate alternative options or even indeed restructuring the NHS. I believe this is largely due to the dominance of the left, especially amongst the media. You know, in the UK, we have shy kippers, shy Tories, and now we even have shy Brexiteers. This is because the left wing dominates the mainstream so much these days that people are shy about voting for UKIP. People are shy about being Tories. People are even shy about being pro-Brexit. You know, if you walk the streets of the UK, if you're out from outside the UK, you'll run into very few people who openly admit to voting for Brexit. This is because they're scared. They're worried. You know, in the UK, you can lose your job for having potentially right-wing views. So it's not surprising people kind of keep these opinions to themselves. I believe there probably is a large percentage of the population that would like to see major restructuring or maybe even complete overhaul, maybe even replacing with the NHS with something different. The argument you usually get in the UK is, well, do you want the American system? No, I don't want the American system. The American system is a terrible setup. It basically, in America, the politicians, the senators, the congressmen are basically in the pockets of the healthcare industry. That's why it's so expensive. It should be a free market. It's meant to be a free market. If it was a free market, healthcare would be a lot cheaper in America. However, all the regulations, all the laws and legislations in America make healthcare incredibly expensive. If we're going to reform the NHS, we should definitely look at countries that have models that already work very well. The models I would particularly favour looking at closely to have an NHS system based similar to would be Switzerland and Singapore. Those are just two of my favourites, but I'm happy for a debate to be maybe the French model, maybe the Dutch model. There's several countries in Europe that have healthcare systems that seem to work much better than the NHS model. But that's the argument you generally get. People seem to be very binary. It's this polarization of politics. It's either we have the NHS or we have the American system. No one really wants to dig deeper and maybe look at better alternatives, especially the Swiss and Singapore models. But long-term, the NHS is doomed to failure. The lack of willingness to even approach or look at other ideas is going to mean we're going to get to a point in the future where the NHS is just so unsustainable, the budgets will be running so high, the quality will be so low. Which is just a natural end to socialised healthcare anyway. You're always going to, with any socialised system, you're going to have high prices for low quality of care. Just look through history, that's just something that happens with anything that's socialised versus anything that's free market. And that's why the best healthcare systems in the world have a market element to them to try and drive prices low and to drive quality high. But the lack of willingness to look at these different ideas in the UK will mean we'll get to a point where there'll be no alternative. We will end up with an American-style system, most likely, where the NHS will just be on its knees and huge corporate companies that will have the politicians of the UK in their pockets. They'll swoop in and we'll end up with a terrible system, probably something that resembles maybe the American system, which doesn't work very well, but the American system works for the benefit of the healthcare companies, not the people. That's something I fear that will happen in the UK. We need to openly talk about the NHS. We need people not to fear, being targeted by the more vigilante sections of the left been attacked for debating ideas whether we should have an NHS, how it should be reformed. But what are your thoughts and opinions on this? Can the NHS keep going forever? Can it keep on with its above inflation budget increases each year? Will we expect the NHS budget as a percentage of GDP to carry on increasing? Or should we model ourselves on a more effective system? Swiss model's not perfect, the Singaporean system's not perfect, but we have the opportunity to create something truly great, and that is the purpose of debate. So what are your thoughts on this? Give me a thumbs up, give me a thumbs down if you agree or disagree. Jason from Liberty Militia signing off, and I'll see you in the next video.